Yoshua Bengio and Rich Sutton, who will be here to answer some of those questions and also probably take some live questions from the audience. So please join me with a round of applause. Let's give a warm welcome to our panel.
All right, oh good, it's working. So I'm actually not on this panel. I'm just here to moderate this panel. Rich and Yosh are going to answer all the questions. And mostly what I've done here is just taken all the wonderful questions you put up on Slack and sort of summarize them and sub-selected a little bit. So I have a longer list here. We're going to get through some of them. But if there's a burning question you have in the audience, we'll also just interrupt this and let you guys ask your questions. Okay, so we're going to start this off with them just answering the very first question. Both of you have had long, successful careers. What do you think has been the key to that? Go ahead, Rich. You're to my right.
I just want to say a few things, even before what's been successful about it. But just that I have worked actually almost equally in corporate labs and in academia. I've spent the last 16 years at U of A, University of Alberta. But before that, I was at AT&T Labs, and I was at GTE Labs, which is another phone company in the States. And I think success just comes from, I've been at this an awfully long time, like more than 40 years. And so just determination and focusing on a problem. Any of us, if we focus on one problem and put the time in, we could become an expert on it. And I think that's I guess I was lucky to pick a topic that's still popular after 40 years. But even that wasn't really a great stroke of insight. I thought I would try to understand the mind for 40 years, and surely that would still be interesting, probably another 140 years.
I think you're right. Determination is very central to it. And listening to, your gut feeling, while also trying to see if your ideas are wrong by taking experimental evidence and other people's opinion in consideration is a fine line. It's very easy, especially in the machine learning community, to just follow the trend, and it keeps moving around and so on. So sometimes the majority think something, but you think otherwise. Well, if you don't see any really strong evidence that your idea is wrong, just go for it. So that's one important thing. Another, why I was successful, I guess I was very lucky to meet the right people, people who helped me understand a lot of things. And I made a choice at some point to go to academia rather than industry, mostly for personal reasons. And it was a very good choice for me. I would say, I guess there are more questions about this later. But the things that really helped me a lot being in academia is interacting with students. I get a lot of pleasure from interacting with students. I feel like it's my group is like a family or something. And of course, there's an amazing leverage to be able to influence all these young minds. Like just in the first couple of years of their grad studies, then they do whatever they want. And so yeah, this has been a really key ingredient in my success.
Nice, great answers. Determination and networks. Okay. The next question, that was a general question many of you had, was what are important skills for researchers? And in a related question, what are some common misconceptions or mistakes made by young researchers or earlier researchers? Or maybe just all researchers.
Important skills for researchers. Many things. It's like, I feel like you have to have lots of different hats. Sometimes I feel like I'm an artist. Sometimes I feel like I'm a teacher. Sometimes I feel like a counselor. Something I feel like I'm somebody who has to be really, really super well organized, which I'm not. So there are many skills. And I'm not sure if there is one dominant skill, but one thing that really helped me a lot is being able to step back from all of the things that are happening, all the meetings, all the discussions, and so on, once in a while, and look at the big picture, and allow yourself to be a little bit on the crazy side with new ideas. So research is exploration. This is really the key thing. If you go back to that, I think you're okay.
Very good, Yoshua. Let me just pause you there, because while you were thinking of things, while you were speaking, I was thinking of things, and maybe you'll think of some more things while I speak. Because there are, as you say, there are many things. You have to learn how to do research. You have to learn how to do experiments. You have to learn a little bit of theory, perhaps, depending upon what you're focusing on. You have to learn how to communicate. Communication is so important. To give a good talk, to present your ideas, just to present your ideas to others. And the key to that is being able to imagine how your ideas would look if you didn't have them. Okay, you have to imagine.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's just the same in writing. And when you write something, you have to forget everything you know and imagine you didn't know it. And so you have to be able to read your writing with fresh eyes. This is really important. You have to be ambitious. It's really important to be ambitious. As Canadians, we have to take that as a special goal. It might not always come so easily. We really have to be ambitious, but we don't want to be arrogant. If you're arrogant, you can't think straight. Okay, you've got to retain your humility and yet be ambitious at the same time, which is a challenging thing. Okay, but it's certainly possible. There's no reason you have to be arrogant just because you're ambitious.
So maybe there are different meanings of the word ambitious. I think ambitious is in looking at the big picture, like big goals that could have a big impact, but not ambitious in the sense of trying to do better than the others. I don't think that really helps.
Very good. You want to have a big impact. You want to pick a topic that might have a big impact.
So often, when somebody comes to me with a problem, I ask, but why? Like, why do you care? And I realize, well, they don't know. And if there is no strong motivation, I'm not interested. I really need to feel like, why am I doing this? So that motivation is so important for a researcher. Very, very important.
I also want to second what you said about being able to subject your ideas to test. You've got to be really determined, but you also have to balance that to test. You got to be really, really interested. Does my idea have a flaw? Does it not work? Because then I really want to know that, because then I would come up with some other idea.
And in that line of thinking, when things don't work as expected, it's an opportunity, right? Especially if others expected it not to work.
Very good.
That was great. So maybe just to summarize what you guys said there, one of the misconceptions might be to focus more on what everyone else is doing and how your work compares to that, versus focusing on the ideas and looking at an opportunity to have impact.
That's a big problem in our field now. Is that there's a herd effect. Yeah, you have to really watch out for that.
And I think somehow, and I don't fully understand why, people in our field today are a lot more competitive than they ought to be, because we're all going to get a good job, right? So, why be so anxious, right? We should step back and look at the hard problems that may take a long time, that others haven't looked at, and if others look at them, great, we can collaborate and build together.
How did this happen? How did our field become so competitive?
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel it was not true. I don't know.
Before deep learning. I don't know. It's bad.
But you can all of you can influence it by how you act and what you say, and if you review papers, to do it in a collegial fashion, and trying to see what's the new idea and what's positive about each idea.
Great. Actually, I'm going to add one more thing to that. Just to wrap, sometimes when you're doing new research, you might think that person's work is really great, and you know the flaws of your own work, and your misconception or mistake is to think what I'm working on is not nearly as good as that other person. But remember that in your mind. You know your work well, so you know its flaws. You don't know the flaws of the other
I know some
methods.
people who have exactly the exact opposite attitude.
Okay.
This is great, Martha. We did get you to participate.
I can't help it. Anyway, I'm going to change it up a little bit and ask a different question about whether it's worthwhile to do a PhD if you don't plan to stay in academia. You know, maybe you're going to do applied AI work in the real world.
I think you should only do a PhD if you're going to enjoy the PhD. Otherwise, don't do it. But it's very, very enjoyable.
That's really true. But it's also, I also usually say that if you want to go into research, it's better to go the whole PhD route rather than try to shortcut it. Just on average, that's usually the best thing
Yeah,
to
and
do.
in the long run, career-wise, more and more having a PhD has a very positive impact, even if you continue your career in industry.
All right. Maybe as a follow-up question, that maybe if you already started a PhD, you know, it's a couple years in and you're not sure you're enjoying it that much, do you have any advice for those people? It's a hard question.
So it's true that when you're doing a PhD, often you're in a period of questioning and uncertainty, and not when knowing if you're in the right place and the right, job. So I guess it goes back to the motivation question. So you have to pick problems that you really care about, that you find interesting, that you'd like to understand. And once you latch on these things, it's a source of motivation for the rest of your life. At least that's what happened to me.
I just want to say something obvious. You know, you guys should know you are like the luckiest people in the world because you are interested in machine learning, and it's 2019. You've won the lottery in terms of syncing up with the universe. You have so many job opportunities. You should do something you enjoy. You know, you should pick the best of the good choices. You're not in the situation of picking the least bad of bad choices. You're in a really good situation.
Okay, another question was, both of you have started companies or been involved in the creation of startups. Should students start companies, and should they do it while in school?
Well, starting companies is an amazing adventure, and I would encourage anyone who has, an appeal, is appealed by this, to try it out. Now, you also have to be careful. It's not for everyone. It's, you're taking risks, potentially getting larger rewards, and you can learn a lot. Maybe not so much on the science side, but on the human side. And so, the answer is yes. And there was something about doing it while you're doing your studies. Yeah. Well, I tend to say wait for, when you're near the end of your studies, because otherwise it's going to be really painful.
Yeah, I think startup life is all-encompassing. I really liked Joshua's whole answer. If you're all inclined, I would encourage you, but it's not for everybody. And it's amazing how possible it is, though, today to make a company.
It's much easier now than when we were younger, I can tell you.
All right, next question.
And if you fail, which is very likely,
You expected to fail, yeah.
you would have learned a lot, and you can, continue whatever else you would have done.
I should have mentioned that I'm in the corporate world now. I'm at DeepMind in Edmonton, and I'm enjoying that a lot. I enjoyed helping bring that into being a couple years ago. And so right now I'm working, primarily at DeepMind, only minority time at the university. And I'm seeing all kinds of different people. Different people want to do full-time university. Some people want to do full-time company. Some people like to split it half and half or different ways. There's a lot of possibilities. You can pick, broadly speaking, you can look forward to, at some point, being able to pick your distribution.
And along those lines, I want to mention at Mila in Montreal, we have set things up so that it would be easy for students to start up a company while they're finishing their studies. So we have space for them. We're making it easier for them to take advantage of the common resources and so on. Even bringing startups from outside academia in the same physical space to encourage this rubbing of shoulders that can help companies really take advantage of what's going on in research. And I think at the level of different countries like Canada, but also in many other countries, the AI startups are going to be a very strong component of economic growth. And so if you want to help the economy wherever you do it, it's actually a very good way to create value, to create jobs. It's also very demanding. Like if you're not ready to spend a lot of time, if you thought that research was very demanding, starting a company is even more demanding. But it, you know, some people really enjoy that ride, and you have to find your space.
Let me say something else that's a little bit obvious. I know Yoshua would agree with me that teaching the next generation is really, really important. And right now we have the best of both worlds. We have all sorts of companies that are interested in doing real things that will matter in the world, and providing resources and funding for research, and yet we have also the opportunities within academia. That's really important to keep new people being trained.
And as you said earlier, we're now in a time when universities and companies are more ready than ever to accommodate people who want to be part-time in one place, part-time in the other place. Used to be like a fairly rigid choice that you had to make, and it's not so anymore.
Good.
Okay, I feel like a natural follow-up question is there a room for a healthy work-life balance in the fast-paced field of AI, and are there any personal tips on how to maintain such a balance?
I don't lead by example.
I was slightly worried about this question.
But I do think it's really important. So, like, I feel like I'm not very, it's not for me to tell people to work less when I'm working so much.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm not a good example either, but we do always make a big point at Deep Mind that it's fine to have a good balance. It's healthy to have a good balance without requiring it. I don't know. It's fine.
So let me mention a personal thing. I have 2 children, and when they were born, it was about the time when I started as a professor, which was fairly demanding. And I did spend quite a bit of time with them compared to what I thought, I could. So like my life was really stressed to try to spend all the time I could with them. But then in retrospect, like 5 years later, 10 years later, I thought, oh, I should have spent like twice as much time with them. It was a huge mistake, right? I hadn't put the values in the right place. But of course, you realize this, and it's too late. They're not babies anymore. So.
So maybe as part of that story, I feel like I have an okay work-life balance. And one of the things is just to accept that you don't have to do everything. You probably have a standard up here, and the real standard everyone else has for you is much down here. And as long as you realize that, you can sort of find a place where you're happy with the work you're doing, and everyone else is probably very happy with the work you're doing. Okay, another question was, are there any important applications or problems?
Wait, I want to go back to the life balance.
Okay, sure.
So. The way that we've been talking about it up to now is like it's just individual choices, but it's not. I think that by reorganizing the rules of the game, how institutions like universities or companies work, we could make it easier for individuals to find more happiness in their work and a better balance. I think we should take more of that point of view.
So there will be room because we're going to fix our structures, so this question is going to be easier in the future. Oh, look, Mike has a comment.
I'm going to say nothing.
What do we need to change to achieve what I suggested? So for for staff, it's easy because you can tell them, oh, this is how many hours you're supposed to work. The problem, it doesn't work with researchers. They would work even if you tell them stop working. I don't know. So maybe the way that we reward research right now is pushing us into this rat race. But how do we fix that? I don't know. I think in the case of grad students and so on, if we could instill more of a sense of security, because a lot of the reasons why people are working so hard is insecurity, like, am I going to do well enough? But I don't have like hard answers.
All right. Did you want to say something, Rich?
I'm good.
All right. Are there any important applications or problems getting less attention from the research community, but you think should receive more attention?
Well, I gave a talk about that Saturday. But you know, every researcher has their own view about what's important, and that's the beauty of research, right? If we were all thinking it's the same thing, well, it wouldn't be as efficient as a collective enterprise to search. We're explorers, right? So if we all go in the same place, it's no good. We have to have diversity of points of views and of topics. You just look at any researcher, you go to their webpage or their recent papers, and you'll see what they think is interesting. And you should find your own.
That being said, I know that both you and I are very interested in how learning systems can go beyond following data sets and
Yes.
learn the way the world works.
Yes.
And
Totally.
this is something that they don't have now, and is an obvious thing that one should learn.
Understanding how the world works is interesting because it's both something that I want to do for myself and what I think AI should be doing. And it's not really a coincidence.
If you could understand if our machines could understand how the world works, and then they could plan the way AlphaGo plans, okay, then we would have, I think, a really cool, the main chunk of what it means to be intelligent. So I'm excited about that.
So maybe to turn that to the question of what kind of applications are we not focusing enough on?
Applications.
Maybe the applications where we could have agents that interact with the world the way that we do. Maybe if we had those applications, it would drive the research even faster.
So I'm thinking about applications from a different angle, which is what impact, if we're successful, say for a particular application, will it have on society? Is it going to be positive? How much? Is it going to be negative? And that has driven me in recent years to things like medical applications, environmental applications, education, things that, as an academic, I can work on without having to think about, is it going to be profitable? But we can contribute through our research. You have to look at where you are. What can I do to make a better world? That's the way I think about it. That's for applications. Yeah. And then the science part is, there's so much, we just want to understand better, intelligence, for example.
Yeah, that's all very, very good. I often get the question about what's going to happen, what's the next application that's going to be really important. And I always have to chuckle a little bit because, my area of expertise is sort of research and knowing what's going to be important in 20 years. It's not knowing what's going to be important the next year. And that's a really important skill that other people have.
I totally agree. And we were talking about startups earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the inventions and innovations that are going to come out of AI and are going to influence our societies are not really going to come from guys like me or Rich, but rather from entrepreneurs, engineers, founders of CEO of startups who really focus on that particular question. Like they make it their life to think, what is it that's missing in society right now? And we have those tools, like how could we build a new gadget that's going to have a big impact?
Okay, so that being said, there is one thing that I like to say, which is that I would like to see applications where the machine actually continues to learn after it's fielded. Not like speech recognition systems that have lots of learning gone into them, amazing deep learning, deep networks, and then when they're fielded, they're fixed. So
yeah,
they can't adapt.
We don't have autonomous systems basically right now that are in products, right? We have them in our papers.
Yeah, but there would be all kinds of ways to use online adaptation, just in the user interface. You know, you use your phone, and like Siri always comes on when I'm just trying to switch from one application to another, and Siri comes on. It's because my finger is a little bit too slow, and it doesn't learn. It doesn't learn that Siri keeps coming up, and I tell it to go away. There's lots of feedback. It could learn from that. There's lots of opportunities for learning online.
Adaptive interfaces, or interfaces that learn how to work better with you. Okay. Next question is, what role do AI researchers have in ethical uses of AI? And also, similarly, how about AI engineers?
Yeah, so why don't you start? I know you have some clear views on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I do too, but I need a little time to.
All right. So I think we have a really important role. And I have changed my mind on this. When I was younger, I thought, oh, I'm doing all this mathy stuff, and it has nothing to do with society. And in a way, I was right, because it didn't feel like there was a connection between what I was doing and what was happening outside of the university context. But it's different now. AI is out there, and it is already influencing many things in society, having complicated feedback loops that we don't understand. And it's going to be even more so in the future. And so for this reason, even though we do even learning theory, we have at least a responsibility to ask the question, how is what I'm doing potentially going to influence society? And is it going to have a beneficial impact or negative impact? Or maybe, the answer is, I don't know, but at least you ask the question. And then, so that's one part. Sometimes you do things that are more applied. So you were talking about engineers. Well, indeed, as you go from more theoretical stuff to more applied stuff, the question becomes even more pressing. When you choose even, the projects that you're going to be involved in, the companies that you're going to be working for, you're sending a signal to the world, right, about what you think is right and what you think is wrong. And then you can be, especially if you get a bit more senior, but nowadays even my PhD students, they get interviewed by journalists, and even sometimes they get invited in panels with all kinds of people that are outside of our research circles. And so when we interact with the rest of society, I think, again, as people that have expertise in our field, we have a responsibility to be part of a discussion. It's not like we have all the answers. Obviously, we don't. But we have our share of knowledge that is part of how to fix the world and make it a better place, and choose, for example, the social norms of the future that are going to be compatible with our values as well as the technology that we're putting into the world. So that's a responsibility as well.
I don't think that AI researchers have a special responsibility to do this, but maybe we all have some, not maybe, we all have some responsibility for our society and how its ethical norms are generated. I'm a real believer in specialization of function. So different people can be good at different things. If we really are interested in ethics, we really care about it, then we should want people to do it that are dedicated to it.
And
right?
there are.
They exist, these people. So all that's true. And I want to say one last thing was that, how a society should be structured, how ethics should work, these are really interesting questions. So, we don't all have to do it, but there are really interesting questions. And if they interest you, you might want to, dedicate a certain part of your career to it.
Actually, I think sometimes that the sort of concepts that we're coming up with in machine learning might be helpful when we think of how society could be reorganized in different ways. Because we're thinking about computation, we're thinking about adaptation, we're thinking about multiple agents.
Thinking about complexity.
And in fact, a lot of these things really are topics that matter when you think about how society is organized and how different agents in society interact. Other disciplines, of course, are looking at this, like economics and so on, but we might bring our own sort of style to these problems.
Very good.
Okay, well, I'm going to switch topics a little bit and ask you a question that was highly upvoted on Slack, which is how do you keep on top of everything that's going on in the field?
You don't. That's related to the work balance. Yeah.
Don't we feel guilty about that, though?
It's terrible. And I feel like a bit of an imposter feeling because I feel all of these people know about this paper and I didn't read it and. But well, we do our best, and then you realize sometimes that you know stuff the other guys don't know, that you've read this paper that they didn't read. So, read the things that you're interested in, and take advantage of the social network that you're in. So, like the people I collaborate with, my students, the other professors, my collaborators anywhere in the world, the discussions that are happening online. They're all sources of information for me to figure out what I should be reading. Not necessarily what is published at NeurIPS, okay? That's one criterion, but it's much broader than that. And in a way, there are too many papers, just, in the best conferences, there are just too many papers. So you can't really use that. Yeah, the best clue I've had about what to read comes from people, usually, that I interact with.
You've got to make choices and specialize a little bit and say, I'm going to know all about whatever it is. I try to read papers on TD Lambda and know what's going on in that theory. And then people, they might know they can ask me if they're missing something about TD Lambda.
Yeah, becoming an expert in something is what a PhD is about, by the way.
And maybe as part of that, when you've decided I'm really interested in this problem, then a natural thing to do is to go do a deep dive into the literature in that area. And that's one way to at least keep on top of all the literature that is out there, not just all the literature from this year.
Oh, and I have another recommendation. When you start your grant studies, you kind of have no choice but spend a lot of time reading. But then at some point you start focusing on something, you do experiments and you try new things and you get into collaborations with other people. And then there's a temptation of just working on these algorithms and these experiments and forget about reading. And that's a terrible mistake, all right? So, cut some time off in your calendar, like every week, spend, I don't know, at least 10 hours or something reading. Make sure, it's like sacred thing that you will do.
And you can't just read the latest stuff. Mm-hmm. You've got to read stuff that's
before 2015.
What?
Before 2015.
Yeah, you got to go back 20, 40, 100 years sometimes. You should pick a topic. Don't pick TD Lambda. Pick something like perception and learning from interaction, or state construction, and then think about how all the different fields have tried to say something about that topic.
Unfortunately, they use other words in the past.
That's true, and that's what makes it extra challenging, but it's extra important because there might be some really important stuff that you don't know about. It's going under a different name in the other field.
Yeah. Or in the same field.
Sometimes. Yeah. Good. Have we reached the end of your list?
I only have one more question. It's sort of provocative a little bit. Okay, so do you think AI might face another winter? And is machine learning in an investment bubble? And do we have any lessons from the previous winter?
The lesson is don't despair.
I think it's possible.
That we are in a bubble?
Yeah. I guess you never know, and maybe we're the worst people to ask. But
so I really feel that the phase in which we are is very different from the previous acceleration phases that we had in the past. for a very, very simple reason, that the tools we've built, they are out there, they are being used, and they are making hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to some companies. And that's a huge difference. So that's not going to go away. And even better than that, the derivative, like the slope of how many applications are coming up, taking advantage of machine learning, is just increasing very rapidly. So I think we're exactly in the opposite of a bubble. We are just at the beginning of the sigmoid.
I think I agree. It's unlikely that we're going to have swings like have happened in the past with neural networks.
What we may have are usual ups and down in like the job market or the investment market. I mean, these things go for all kinds of reasons, political reasons, just the demand and you know, things that are swinging with time naturally. But I think the underlying current is very strong.
Okay, that was the main questions that I have listed. I have a few backup questions, but maybe now's a good time to see if you guys have any questions. So does anyone have any questions?
Are we going to use a mic?
Yeah, I think so.
So should they raise their hands?
Yeah, right here's a question.
Somebody has mics?
All right, say it really loud and I'll repeat it.
So when we are faced with a controversial project, usually we have two choices. The first one to say, I'm not going to do it. Probably someone is going to do it and I'll miss on the money. Probably I'll feel good that I didn't do it. The other option is that I will join and try to work on that project, and I may try to do it in a better way or make sure it is safe. But then there is the company's policies, which I might accept and change the scenario, do something. So what would a researcher do?
Wow, that was a very philosophical question.
Good luck.
Okay, the summary for the question is essentially an ethics question. If you have a project that you could, a problem you could work on that seems a little, could be unethical, but could also be, you know, I'm just gonna say could be unethical. Should you join it and try to make it so that it goes down a more ethical route, or should you choose not to work on it at all? And I'm gonna leave out the money part of that because I think that maybe wasn't relevant.
No,
Maybe the first one gives you lots of money. Okay, so now
I don't
should
think
you
we
be
should leave out-
unethical and make money?
Yeah,
Or?
I don't think we should leave out the money part.
Okay.
Because people think about this. So I think you should leave out the money part in the sense that you should make your choices so that you choose to work on something you're comfortable with, that you feel good about, and don't work on something that you feel queasy about. You will find another job. Don't worry, there are lots and lots of jobs in our field, so just go and find something else.
It's hard to recommend being unethical and making money. I'm sorry.
No, but of course, other people will do it. But that's not a good reason, you know. There are lots of unethical things happening in the world. Doesn't mean that you have to do it too.
Thank you. So I was wondering, do you think if there's anything psychology or neuroscience can add to AI? And if there's anything, do you
Totally.
think...
It has already.
But it seems to me most of them are just added the philosophical directions or
No.
some inspiration or
No,
thinking.
it's much more than philosophical. Let me give you an example that people don't know about. You know the piecewise nonlinearities that we use in deep learning that actually make a huge difference compared to what people used before, which were the like sigmoid and hyperbolic tangent. We tried doing this in deep nets because we thought, oh, this is more biologically plausible. Let's try and see what happens.
Another one is catastrophic forgetting. The best papers I know about that are by psychologists, and that's a little strong. But psychologists definitely have something to say about this one of the most important problems in our field.
All right, let me give you another example, very recent one. Attention mechanisms. I mean, it's like transform the field of deep learning, at least for NLP applications, completely. And obviously it comes from an inspiration from psychology, right?
So I have to go and do the obvious one, which is I started in psychology, and it was very clear to me the psychologists knew much more about learning than any of the AI people. And things like temporal difference learning came directly out of psychology, and now it's come back, and you know, they look at parts of the brain, the reward systems in the brain are all, they're theorized in terms of temporal difference learning. So that's a really clear example of strong positive interactions, both ways.
So let me add something else, which is more philosophical. In my way of thinking about interesting problems in machine learning, often I apply a filter, which is, does this make sense from the point of view of humans or animals?
Yeah.
And that eliminates a lot of algorithms, I can tell you.
Yeah. Very good. Pleased to hear that, Joshua.
Where's the microphone? No, just.
Ah, okay.
How much of the things you said about the prospects for people working in AI machine learning, how much do you think it applies to outside Canada, like in Europe or East Asia or Africa or South America? Like if you're going to, you know, not choose to move to Canada.
What? No way. No, seriously, I think it's happening all across the world. Of course, we're, you know, ahead of time here, but I see a lot of movement in Europe. I see even in developing countries, and I think we have a responsibility to help that. Whether it's in Africa or even in South America, in Asia, I mean, obviously. So yeah, I mean, machine learning and AI are super hot all across the world, and it's going to have a tremendous economic impact.
We should be thinking about the whole world. Absolutely. If you could pass your mic. Yeah,
Hi,
good.
yeah. I had a question. So you were talking a lot about how do you pick projects that are worth pursuing, but how do you pick projects that you should abandon? Like, how do you decide that, okay, this is not working? At which point do you decide ever that maybe this is not worth pursuing?
That's hard. So I noticed one thing with research ideas and projects, that you create a sort of emotional attachment to them. And then, well, initially you're like in love, right? And then it doesn't work. But you want to give it a chance. And then the worst thing is when you say, it doesn't work, I'm going to drop it. And then 2 years later, somebody picks it up and it works really well.
So in my experience, I would generally have multiple problems that I'm interested in, and some of them go for long pauses, right? And some of them you end up abandoning. Maybe you abandon them just because they live on for an eternal pause. Yeah, you can't cry over. If the milk is spilled, you know it's a sunk cost. Just because you've worked on it a whole lot doesn't mean you should work on it some more. You got to always look at the future, and you're going to have many things. You want to have a variety of things, and then you decide one day, oh, this idea is ready. I can just push it through and get the results and make a publication. And is it the right time for that idea? It's
Yeah,
like
so it has happened to me a lot that I have an idea at some point, and then I work a bit on it, and then maybe the first experiments don't work, and I move on to something else. But it stays in the back of my mind, and then something else comes up, maybe someone else I meet who's interested in pursuing this, or new results that come in that suddenly could be useful, and I go back to it, right? So you don't have to completely abandon something. So it's a very hard question you're asking. I mean, there's a whole spectrum between being too opportunistic and then not having a long-term vision, and then not listening to the evidence that, well, your idea is not working.
As an additional point to that, if you're working on a problem that you think is really important and the thing that's not working is one idea to try to solve that problem, then you probably haven't really wasted your time. You're not really abandoning something. You're going to take some understanding that maybe this wasn't the best algorithm, but you presumably learned a lot about your problem, and then you actually only care about solving your problem, so you're still working on your problem. You're just not working on that specific algorithm to solve that problem. So maybe if you're working on problems that are important to you, that's likely not going to change that quickly.
Oh, and another suggestion, when you work on an idea and it doesn't work, trying to figure out why. And that in itself could be a very, very important contribution. And so even the negative results, right, we don't reinforce sufficiently their importance in our community, but really we should. In fact, some of my most cited papers have been negative results.
Let me just say one more thing about that. Maybe it's obvious. Intelligence is a large and complicated thing. It has many different parts. We can't really work on all of the parts at once, and that makes it challenging because you're going to choose some part to work on, and how can you tell if it's really done right, if it's failed or succeeded, when you don't have all the other parts that it needs to work with? And so this is a fundamental problem of our topic, that we're working on something that we will only see it fully working when we have all the parts together.
Which means we should respect other people's choices that are different from ours, of course.
Yeah.
So I had a question about more of on the what type of incentives there could be to kind of promote more value in the quality of the research instead of kind of quantity. Say key performance indicators now are paper-based, how many papers, how many projects, how many things, and it doesn't necessarily equate to quality.
It's an excellent question.
Yeah.
So I have a related suggestion. Our field has focused a lot on conference papers, and the advantage of conference papers is that the turnover, I mean, like the time to publication is very quick. And we've left journal papers, which usually take more time to be reviewed. But the thing with conference papers is they come with deadlines, and that makes us work like crazy on those deadlines. And if there was only one deadline per year, it wouldn't be so bad. But now we have like 6 deadlines per year in my group, right? I'm sure it's the same in many labs. And so we just keep rushing like crazy all the time with little breaks in between. If we were to shift our publication process so that the end product would be, well, if we were to say we do, like in other communities, you would basically submit to a journal, and that could happen at any time during the year, like usual. And then if the paper is accepted, then it could be selected for presentation at a conference. That's like putting things upside down. So the effect would be that we would have better papers at conferences, and we would not be always rushing for these deadlines. Now, I don't know if this is going to happen, but in order to make it happen, we would need to find a review process for journals that would be as efficient as the one we have for conferences, so that, you know, in a period of 3 months, we could make sure that papers are reviewed.
This is a really good problem. Like, how can we structure our field so that it moves in a good direction? I have no idea how to do it. I want to get the microphone to Adam White here, because I know he's like the world's best reviewer, and he probably has some ideas about how to fix the field.
Yeah, I think I agree with Yoshua. The moving to the journal thing is exactly what we've been thinking about in our group, is switching to journal papers and thinking how we can rearrange our conferences so that it isn't just this huge crush every six months of all these papers, and it's not clear what the real
every 2 months.
Yeah, and you know, we can use good metrics to evaluate good research, right? Like the 10-year research awards, those things really matter, right? The paper that was good in the last 10 years, that's what matters.
Yeah, long term. So that's another problem with conferences, is that it puts us in a mode of short-term little projects, and we do incremental research, and we never have the time to embark on something that might take 2 years before we get a result. It just doesn't happen in our field anymore. Like every few weeks, I have a student coming into my office and asking me, okay, so there are 5 weeks left to deadline X. What do you suggest I do?
And I think I want to actually maybe turn it back on people like me and Rich, who are in these companies now where we have more freedom to work on these long-term projects and to show off what it means to invest over a multi-year project and how that can really affect the scientific community and the progress of the field. So we should be doing a better job setting a good example and not just following the trends also.
Well, I've heard that in companies also you get these quarterly kind of reporting, which also put people in this mode, and then they're part of the community which is driven to publish. So the publication disease is sort of,
it spreads.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
I have heard one suggestion given that when we evaluate people, we should be asking for the best 2 papers that the person thinks that they did, and it would be that should be enough. You know, either for getting a faculty position, or for getting tenure, or for getting hired at companies.
So number of citations of your 2 best papers rather than H-index.
Maybe a justification for letters from someone saying these 2 papers are great for these reasons, or seminal in our field for these reasons.
I have a question that I'm going to play devil's advocate here, not because I disagree, but just to spur on the conversation. Do you think switching to such a method would stifle innovation and maybe slow down the progress in what?
Why would it?
Just simply because people aren't seeing as many papers, perhaps maybe getting as much out of them, maybe coming up with more ideas.
Don't you think we have enough papers?
Well, that's very true.
Our field has grown enormously, and we have to deal with that somehow, or celebrate it, as you're suggesting.
So I think we could build new tools for organizing our results in something that might be slightly different from the current format of papers. For example, there is a sort of lineage of papers that follow each other, often from the same group. Sometimes there are revisions to the same paper, and it's hard to actually put these revisions in a journal paper or in a conference paper. So maybe we can like restructure the way that the knowledge is being presented so that it's not broken in so many pieces that are disconnected from each other. But I'm not sure exactly how to do that.
Yeah. So if you were to recommend 1 or 2 or 3, like a few activities, that wouldn't take like a whole lot of time, that would improve the efficiency of what you do, what would you recommend? Like
The individual researcher, what should they do?
yeah, so some activities that people may not be doing, and that would be
Don't
be
respond to email immediately. There's a thing in Gmail where you can like delay by whatever time you want.
Really?
Yeah. No, because the problem is like I spend all my time on email instead of doing research. I mean, some of it is research, but email is like destroying our ability to focus and concentrate on one thing for hours and hours, which is what research should be about.
And number 1 is writing. I think Mohammed knows I'm a big proponent of every researcher having a notebook they write in, ideally every day, shoot for about a page a day. Just put what your thoughts are, explain to yourself what your thoughts are, and put it into sentences and paragraphs. And if you do that consistently over a period of time, years, you will have much more interesting things to say to other researchers.
You'll have a coherence of thought. One other thing I think sometimes people don't put enough emphasis on is collaboration. Like you can be a lot more effective if you work with groups of people. And so if you have the tendency to think, I want to work on this thing by myself because it's easier, or I want this to be my only paper, like I'm the sole author, you will be less effective. Run, Mike.
Along that same vein, what do you think is like a productive way to handle competition between researchers, say, like sharing ideas, and how do you
You mean within the same group or across
within the
organizations?
same group or across organizations, or I mean maybe even just within the same group? I think it can happen Right?
So one option would be to remove author names from papers. I think there's so much around the ego here, but I don't know how to fix that. I mean, I'm kind of half joking. But really, we should collaborate because it's fun to do it. Like, enter into a discussion with somebody who has a different view, and brings you something, and really, you can see how it makes the science advance. It's such an amazingly human and positive thing to do. I think what part of the answer is we should make sure that the social norms, including the laws, make it easy to do that. Like, we want to remove barriers for collaboration as much as possible. Some of that is cultural. I mean, like in some companies, there's a lot of collaboration with people outside the company. In other companies, it's not so. Some of that is sort of legal barriers. Some of that is cultural. But we should try to minimize all of these barriers.
My experience may be special, but it's valid experience. And my experience has been very much that that you should always that you should not worry about someone stealing your idea. If they do steal your idea, you should celebrate, because then they have the burden of carrying it out and talking about it and publicizing it. And you know, it's like they doubled your efforts because they're doing that, and now you can go do something else. It's really true. And if your idea is really good, you'll have to like force them to understand it. You know, it's like it has never worked out to be a problem for me.
Good, I was going to say the same thing. It's always wonderful if someone wants to hear your recent idea, because you get a chance to say it out loud. And the disadvantage to not saying it out loud is you won't catch errors in it, and even just saying it out loud is extremely helpful. Much more likely to help than it is that someone takes your idea. Okay, I think I'm going to have to end it because I see the timer is done. So let's thank our panelists here. And I'm going to hand it off to Warren.
Thank you, Mark.
Perfect. All right, thanks so much. Some awesome conversations going on today, and I'm excited that we are about to transition into the evening. One last word from one of our sponsors. Tonight never would have been able to happen without the support from Alberta Innovates, longtime Amii board member and CEO of Alberta Innovates. Please join me with a warm round of applause to welcome to the stage Laura Kilcrease.
What an impressive panel. Actually, what also an impressive audience. Now, I have a speech for you, but I don't think you probably want another speech, right? So if you may hold this. This is what I do with speeches. Number one, I want to thank you for being here. If you don't already know, you are special. Over 1,500 people applied, and there's just over 300 here. More importantly, I want you to know about the province of Alberta. And the province of Alberta, this is a place for you to come, learn, actuate what you want to do, and grow here. And this event tonight is allowing you to interact with more of industry, to find the connections you want. You know, we are a big oil and gas province, but we're also a big agriculture province, and we're a big healthcare province, and we're just a big budget province. And even though it's not about the money, it's about what we do, it's people like you that allow the future to be held and to grow here. And this is why Alberta Innovates has been a funder of Amii and the University of Alberta for 17 years in the artificial intelligence space. To date, we've already invested $46 million. And I think as we go forward, there's going to be many, 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 many more opportunities. Even last week, we just were awarded $108 million for the smart farm of the future in this province that will need your help in artificial intelligence with that data, with the new robotics that the farmer of the future will need. And that's just one tiny example. You affect every business and every industry that will be in this province. If not here today, will be here over the next 5 to 6 years. So my plea to you is Did you have fun? Are you going to have fun tonight? Who's going to find a new opportunity in Alberta or a deal here? Raise your hand. Come on, ladies. 30% of the startups come from Alberta in Canada, right? So I really, really want you to have a good time. From my team at Alberta Innovates, the team we work with at Amii, the University of Alberta, I can't be more ecstatic that you're here. And if there's something you think we can do for you, let us know. But my challenge to you now is twofold. First, find one thing out of tonight that's good for you. A new connection, a new company to talk about, a new product to build, a new startup. And the second one is, you're going to have to race me to get to the bar. Thanks.
All right, with that, enjoy the night, everyone. There's a bunch of companies and really great people waiting for you just on this side of the curtain, food and drink, and I hope to see you at the bar as well. Thank you.